Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today we take time to go back in our Wayback Machine and we're going to work on a reel from the 1950s. This is a Shakespeare model 1950. It's not the date of the reel, it's that model. The date of the reel is actually the model code, FG. And Shakespeare used a secret decoder to tell you what that was. If you look at the F, it's the 5 and the G is the 4. This reel is made in 1954. So we're going to take this reel apart. We'll show you how to service it. It runs nicely. This one handle, this knob turns free and easy. This one is stuck. That's not uncommon for the era. Sometimes you can free it with some penetrating oil. Sometimes you can't. What happens is that plastic swells against that inner stud. And well, there's no real easy solution for that. There is some solutions that I've heard. I don't know if they're temporary, if they work or not. One of them involves using a hair dryer to heat this up, because if there's any greases or grime or anything else that's caused this thing to stick, then that heat would melt that and help you along that route. Well, we're going to take the side plate off. We're going to show you how the reel is made and how to service one of these if you have it. And we're going to do that by removing the faceplate here that has 2 screws in it holding it on. While I do this, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe to my channel, please use that notification button. That'll let you know when I'm posting my reel repair videos, and you can decide whether that's a video that you want to see. Okay, let's just pull that off for a moment. And one of the things that's interesting is that I need to remove the handle here, and in order to do that I need to get the drive. So this is an era where you had US threaded ones or SAEs. This is a 5/16 nut that holds the handle on, and so you want to remove that. If you have the wrench, that's fine. I just find with the Shakespeare reels, these nut drivers work very well. A couple of things. If you like these types of videos, I encourage you to subscribe, and you'll see all kinds of things and learn a little bit more about the fishing reel industry from my videos. And secondly, I encourage you to take pictures as you disassemble a reel. And the reason for that is, well, a lot of things go on in the manufacture. A lot of things go on when you remove a reel, like we just saw that this was all moving away on me here. And if you don't take the pictures, you may lose your reference points. If you lose your reference points, well, it's going to be very hard to recover from that if you're not familiar with the reel itself. We have a lot of dirt on the inside of that. That's typical of an older reel. And well, I think this whole thing will come out now. The main gear is going to come out, and this is the worm gear. Now the worm gear, you don't need to take that off if it's running. It's nice and clean. I just got the spool out of there by tilting to show you that. What you do want to make sure is it's clean. If it's not clean, you have a couple of options here. You can pull the worm gear by removing this line guide. There's a little screw that's holding the pawl in place. You remove the pawl and the whole piece will come out. This one just simply needs to be oiled and reassembled there. I'm going to take a moment here just to put a little dot of grease onto the stud on the back end of that worm gear. I don't grease the slots in the worm gear, the track, because that tends to hold dirt. And when the dirt accumulates in those tracks, well, the reel doesn't have a line guide that functions properly. Trying to make sure it's turning nice and easily, which it is, and then just set it aside. Normally you would want to clean this. This is a clean reel here. It's not clean inside, but it's clean on the rest of this. And again, you want to take a dot of grease into the back bushing area where your spool is going to go. Take a look, make sure that you check the spool for any damage. This one's in good condition all around. Same thing with the drive gear here. And then do the same thing. Check the teeth. If they're not bent or chipped or broken or cracked in any regard, simply add grease. Same thing on the back, even though we put a little bit of grease into the stud. And now we can load the spool back into the frame, just like that. Now we want to do a couple of things. So first thing I notice is it's kind of straight gearing, so it's not going to matter which side goes on, but I did notice as I took it off that this grease was facing me, so I'm going to call out the face side. I'm going to reinstall the same way. You want to wipe down that little piece of grease. That seems to be the only part that's on here. Check the teeth. If you have an issue with the teeth, go ahead and get a hard brush and pull through on that. So a lot of folks are wondering, gee, all these reels look the same. What's different inside with these? Well, in this case, you have a very big gear driving the small gear. And that big gear is almost opposite the way that a lot of these drives go. A lot of these are set up for the relatively smaller gear to be in that case. And that off of that smaller gear, there's a secondary gear that drives the line guide. Here what they've done is they basically have consolidated both into one gear. So this is going to drive the spool, and it's also going to drive that worm gear. Okay, we're going to put some fresh grease here. So Shakespeare was one of the first manufacturers of direct drive reels and level wind reels. William Shakespeare had his company out of Kalamazoo, Michigan, and he came up with the idea of the level wind guide. And he did that by observing how sewing machine bobbins were loaded. He had taken a trip, I believe it was to Boston, which was a big place for clothing manufacture in the 1800s. He went up there and he was noticing how the spools were loaded for the bobbins with thread. A lot of parallels there to a level wind guide, and well, he kind of mimicked that in a fishing reel. And the most modern reels that we have today with level wind guides are still using that worm drive technology 120 years later. Kind of amazing. Some things never go out of style. All right, well, I'm just trying to get there's one or two pieces of relatively stubborn chunks of grease on here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the penetrating oil as a solvent. I'm going to use some light steel wool, almost like you're cleaning a pot or a pan, just for enough abrasion to get that old grease out of that channel there. Okay, very good. The rest is tarnished now. And all we need on this case then is we need to put a little bit of grease in two spots. We want to put a little bit of grease into the ferrule where that main drive is going to go, and a little bit onto the bushing and the stem from the worm gear. That's it. That's your direct drive. Let's line this up. Just review. We made sure that all the internals of the reel were clean. We made sure that we noticed how they went on. We took care to clean, oil, and adjust. Now we have two screws that close the case up. And this is the model 1950. I just did a reel of the day the other day. It was the model 1900 President. And Shakespeare also had another model, which was a 1900, and I believe that was a direct drive. That one I think had the plastic case to it. I'd have to go back and look. The President had a different case, but inside it's essentially the same reel. And same thing with the 1900. So once you get the premise down of how these reels come together, you don't need to see a video, or you don't need to go search the schematics for every version of the reel. For example, Penn has a fairly consistent setup in their boat reels from the 1960s through the 1990s. Pretty much use the same kind of 3-spool release, the same kind of yoke and jack and bridge and all that other stuff. And even though the models changed, they were more about sizes of capacities and gear ratios and the like, but the core mechanical function did not change much. Well, I'm using that same piece of steel wool here to knock off some of that corrosion on the back end of the handle. Now we can put the handle on, get that 5/16 nut cap, put that on, get my driver, tighten that down. Let's give it a try. Oh, smooth, nice. So the only issue that I would see with this wheel is that at the time, or for the time, only one of these knobs turn. The other one hasn't loosened up, and I wouldn't attempt to at this age. But again, you don't need necessarily, you can let it roll in your hand rather than having to clamp down firm and use the inner stud. You can still fish this one very easily with the turn of the handle, regardless of whether that knob is turning or not. One final thing, this is a spool adjuster. If you back it off a little bit, the reel will turn faster. So you want to use this to adjust for the spool tension. It's called a spool tensioner. You want to adjust for that with the weight of the lure that you're having to minimize your backlash when you're casting. So that does have a purpose to it other than holding the spool kind of tight. Well, that's it. That's your Shakespeare Direct Drive or Direct O Drive. It's the model FG, which we said conforms or corresponds to the decoder, which is 1954. It's the model 1950 as a reel. And this is a beauty, Scott. I'm glad you found this one at the flea market, and thank you for sending it in for the service. I hope everybody's enjoyed that. To our first responders and essential personnel, thank you for all it is that you do to keep us safe. Your efforts truly are appreciated. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.